G'day guys, welcome back to Off-Road Crusader. This is an awesome episode for you guys to watch because I'm getting rid of this plastic thing. It's worked great. Surprisingly, it's much more sturdy than the Prado rear bumper. It hasn't fallen apart. It's got its fair share of scratches and scuffs and bits of paint missing. And look, I've been wanting to update it for a little while to get a little bit of extra clearance and just to sort of future-proof this rear end. They do, I mean, there's plenty of videos out there for people who have plastic rear ends on their 200 series. They'll back it into something or drop off a ledge and the whole thing just goes all skew-whiff and it looks ridiculous. So I'm going to be replacing it now before I break everything, which is a very strange thing for me to do. And what I'm replacing it with is this. So that is a Kmart Rear Bar. Very excited to have that on. Two-piece rear bar, which is kind of cool. I like that it's sort of left and right, a little bit reminiscent of the Prado. But obviously this time it's actually properly engineered, which is nice. At some stage I will be adding a wheel carrier to this as well. It's one of the few bars where you can have the bar and then add the wheel carriers later, or jerry can holders, or whatever you want to do, as opposed to having the bar with already having spindles on it and then needing to sort of add them straight away, otherwise it looks a bit dicky. But yeah, that's why I've gone the Kmart bar. I know it's a popular bar and a lot of people go, oh, you're an influencer, you meant to go something small and unknown. But to be honest, I think it's probably one of the better bars that integrates best into the rear is the 200 series. It doesn't have some of the features that some other bars have or some of the uniqueness that some others have, but I think it just looks really, really nice. It's a really good platform to start with, especially with wheel carriers and such. I've got mine colour-coded. Kaymar provide these just in black, but you can get them colour-coded if you want to go through your supplier or you want to get it done locally. It's easy enough to do. It will cost you a few $100 to get it colour-coded, but in my instance with all of my other bar work colour-coded, I think it's definitely worth it. So we're going to get straight into it. I'm really keen to start this. It's going to be a bit of an instructional video on how to do it. You'll see it as a step-by-step, and I'm really keen to see how this looks in the end. We'll get rid of this plastic one, or what's left of it, and get some actual steel on there.
The first step of this project is to remove the rear mud flaps, which you do by removing these two plugs with a Phillips head screwdriver and the rest with a T30 Torx screw. Don't forget the two hiding underneath and inside the bumper. Next, undo the three 10mm bolts to release the splash guard from the bumper. Use a flat bladed screwdriver to pry down on the clip to remove the tow bar cover from the bumper. It's then also worth removing the tow bar hitch to keep everything out of the way. You can then remove the 10 and 12mm bolts underneath the bumper. Using a trim removal tool, gently pry up the top step off of the bumper to expose the bolts holding it to the body. Remove the 5 bolts holding the bumper to the body. Make sure to keep the rubber washers as they'll be needed to refit the bumper back to the car. Finally, remove the 2 black plastic clips near the tailgate to have the bumper ready for removal. You can now start pulling the bumper away from the vehicle, starting within the wheel arch and working your way around underneath the tail lights. Don't forget to unplug the parking sensor harness away from the vehicle before you try to remove the bumper. The Deutsch plug here is from My Own Accessories. After washing off a heap of the mud that you had still there from your last four-wheel driving trip, you can then pull the bumper away from the vehicle and set it aside, ready for marking up for cutting. This will then expose all the rest of the mud that you've never washed off. You should definitely get rid of this now before you proceed, because it will get into everything. You'll now need to remove the rear parking sensors from the bumper. It's a bit tricky to show you in the bumper, but the little tabs here do fill up with mud, and you may need to use a pick to get all the mud out so the clips will actually open. You can see here how I'm using a small pick to lift up the tab to release the sensor from the wiring. By compressing the small clips surrounding each of the sensors, it should be able to fall out from the bumper. Reminder that if it's full of mud, you will need to pick the mud out of these clips before it will move. Next, you can remove the tow bar surround black plastic by removing these 2 blue clips, and the black plastic section should just fall off towards the rear. You'll also need to remove the bumper support plastic and remove 10mm of material from the underside of the plastic. Here I've marked from the center line and measuring outwards, You measure these two lines and then remove 10 mm of material downwards from that point. This will allow for the brackets of the Kmart bar to pass underneath the bumper and not hinder on this black support plastic. You can now refit the bumper back to the vehicle, making sure that it's all slotted back into place towards the top of the bumper. It's now time to start marking out your spots where you're going to cut the bumper to fit the new bar. Measure a vertical line down from the tail light following the fold in the bumper, 205 mm. You'll then need to move around the bumper and draw a line down 193 mm. When you connect these two lines at the bottom, you should get 260 mm apart on a horizontal axis. You may need to adjust and move these lines as needed in order to get these lines nice and square to each other. Tape on the supplied template from Kaymar onto this line that you've just drawn and line it up horizontally with this line. You can then start to attach the bottom of the template to the car in order to get the bottom of the middle cutout section to be a nice smooth curve with the rest of the template. You'll know this is right when the curves all line up. Once finished, be sure to draw a line all the way along the bottom of the template. At the wheel arch end, measure down 305 mm perpendicular from the bumper fold line. Mark this spot. You can now connect this point all the way around to the existing line you drew underneath the fog light. I found it best to cover a large portion with masking tape and then use another piece of masking tape to feel out the line between the wheel arch and underneath the fog light. You can then run a felt tip marker along this piece of masking tape to get yourself a nice straight line. Using a ruler helps if you have one long enough. Moving to the center section of the bumper, mark a line across between the outside notch outs. The very center of the tow hitch will be higher than your line. It should look like this. You'll then need to draw a line connecting this middle section all the way around to your curve underneath the fog light. It is a long straight line, and obviously if you have a long straight rule, it's going to be nice and easy. One way to sort of check yourself is to measure your distance between, say, this line you've just drawn, and I've gone off of sort of the mid curve of where the bumper's coming over to this top section. Where I've measured that, for me, it's come up around your 11 or 12 mil, and that's been a good way to sort of check as I'm going along that I'm not skewing too far. Obviously it's not going to be 100% precise, but it's a good way to sort of make sure that you're not diverting like crazy. It did also bring up that the heights here and also underneath that fog light were slightly different. And again, they were only about 4 mil, but it was just a little bit that I just went, oh, it's going to look a bit funny. So I split the difference and basically drew it through there. I'm going to cut the bumper, so I'm giving myself a little bit of extra. Basically that way, if it is a little bit ski whiff and I'll go to line everything up and it's not quite right, I can have a little bit more bumper I can actually cut more off. So now comes the nerve-wracking bit where we get to cut the bumper. There are a number of ways you can obviously doing it, using air body saw or a jigsaw or anything else you want to use. Even a hacksaw would probably work as well. I'm going to use an angle grinder. That's what Kaymar recommend they use. I've just got a nice flat cutting disc on here. It's a fairly new one, and I'm just going to slowly work my way across there. The disc tends to give you a fairly straight cut over a long distance because the cutting surface can be quite large, whereas with the smaller saws, because your distance is only that big, you can sometimes wander a little bit and it'll give you a bit of a weird cut, but fingers crossed this all works. Worst case scenario, I get a brand new bumper out of it. With the bumper now cut, you can now deburr all the edges on the bumper using a file. Sit back, have a cuppa, enjoy the nice straight cut that you've just made, then remove the bumper from the vehicle. Refit the rear mud flap back to the vehicle using the top and inner screw, and then you can line up the gold mud flap bracket with the rest of the bolt holes in the side. Get the holes lined up in the top, then drill them through to 7 mils diameter. You can then use the supplied Phillips head bolts and nuts to secure this gold mud flap bracket to the vehicle. Lower the spare tyre down using the supplied tools from Toyota, which will allow you to access the inside of the chassis rail. You'll then need to pass these 2 bolts through the chassis using the wire to have them protrude out on the outside of the chassis rail. You can then fit the side wing support braces to the chassis. using the M14 washers and nuts to hold it in place. Just do them finger tight for now. You'll then need to fit the 2 slotted angle brackets against the bottom of the black body vent as seen here. Hold in position and then use the holes in the plate to drill out 2 5mm holes and fix the plate to the vent using the supplied pop rivets. You can now refit the bumper back to the vehicle for the final time. You can now fit the supplied pinch weld to the bumper. I find it best to sort of curl it back over itself and push it up into the plastic, and it seems to grab on and form a nicer edge. Looking over the whole bumper, if you find that there are any sections where the pinch weld looks uneven, you can pull and push the pinch weld either side of it to create a nice even line the whole way around the car. Now is also the best time to add on the supplied wiring that comes with the Kmart Rear Bar. One length is longer, which needs to go to the passenger side of the vehicle, and the other will be shorter, which stays on the driver's side. These are to allow for the supplied lights to tap into the tow bar harness. It's easiest here just to sort of strip back the insulation and add on the wiring into these. Do be aware that indicators left and right are different colours and not to mix them up, as it will really confuse you down the track. It's now time to start fitting the Kaymar bar to the car. Start by putting the sensors into the bar in correct order and then slide the steel bumperettes over the top of the chassis rail, and they should just... Oh, hang on a minute. Well, if you have big tyres like I do, you'll need to actually lower the rear tyre down in order to get the bumper to slide all the way over the top of the chassis rail. With the bar on and looking awesome, you can now loosely fit a bolt to the mud flap support bracket. Also these large gold spacer blocks in the centre with an M10 bolt and nut on the top, as well as a large M14 bolt onto the other bracket there. You may need to remove your exhaust hanger rubber to access the M14 bolts that go up into the bar. This is easily done by prying off with a screwdriver with a bit of WD-40 to lube the rubbers up to get everything to move nicely. You can then adjust the bar up, down, left and right so it's centered around the hitch receiver in the tow bar. Once you're happy with the location, you can now start tightening all the bolts up. Start with the large M14 bolts on the wings, moving to the M10 bolts where your spacer blocks are, making sure to grab the nut on top of it as well with the washer. I've chosen to add red Loctite onto all my bolts to make sure they don't come off. You can then tighten up the 2 M14 nuts going into the chassis where you've inserted those bolts earlier, making sure they're nice and tight with some Loctite on there. I did also push up a little bit on the bar, trying to get the wings going to be sit as high as possible so that the bar was nice and level when I was looking at it from outside the car. You can then also tighten the 2 bolts that hold the brace onto the wing of the bar as well, making sure nothing's going to move around when you drop off a ledge. Now's also the best time to reinstall the black support plastic that goes underneath the bumper. Reinstall that as well as the parking sensor harness, making sure to plug it back into the car end as well. The last step is to install the rubber spacer blocks which go between the bumper and the new Kmart Rear Bar. These basically anchor the bumper down into the bar and make sure that there's not going to be any flapping around or anything like that. Mark out the holes and then drill 2 7mm holes down through the plastic bumper and into the steel bar, and then install the foam spacer blocks as well as the M6 screws and nuts. These don't have to be super tight, they just have to be tight enough to slightly squish the foam together and hold the bumper down. If you tighten them up too much, you will end up bowing the bumper in and it will just look silly. Next, you can reinstall the 5 bolts and large rubber washers to hold the bumper back to the body of the vehicle. You can now reinstall the black plastic step that goes on top of the bumper. Make sure to align all the clips with the corresponding holes in the bumper, then just push it down to clip everything back into place. The final step is installing the tail lights into the rear bar. Start by fitting the flange nuts into the light surrounds, then pass the wiring through the hole and then fit the 2 countersunk M5 screws into each side of the light. Make sure you get them correct left and right. The indicator should be in the top left hand or top right hand corner of the light. Connect the lights up to the wiring harness that you ran earlier, making sure that the left hand indicator is connected to the yellow wire and the right hand indicator is connected to the green wire. Kaymar supply blade terminals to go with these. However, I will be using a 5-pin Deutsch plug so that I can replace the lights down the